Hey everybody, this is Cameron, and happy Friday the 13th to all you Twin Peaks, David Lynch, Mark Frost fans. All right, we have a few things to talk about today. First up, I want you to go over to a website called Night Tide Magazine. And there is an author over there by, I think the name is Elijah Fisher, and they have been writing some really great Twin Peaks articles over there lately. This one in particular is about Fire Walk with Me, the cyclical trauma of the Palmer women in Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. Fire Walk with Me is less whodunit than what did it do to her. A brutal, surreal elegy for Laura Palmer and the mother who felt every echo of her daughter's unraveling. Really great stuff over there. Make sure to check it out. All right. Next up, we have a really great interview that Mark Frost and Kyle MacLachlan did with Empire Magazine out of the UK here. Let's see here. Let me pull this up. So, yeah, the Empire Film Podcast. Kyle MacLachlan and Mark Frost on Twin Peaks and David Lynch says, here's a damn fine special episode of the Empire Podcast for you to enjoy. We're in the grip of Twin Peaks fever all over again. The seminal David Lynch Mark Frost TV show is being celebrated this Sunday, June 15th, at the BFI South Bank in London with a special 35mm print screening of the show's pilot. Wow, that would be pretty awesome to see. And if that weren't enough, every single episode of Twin Peaks, including 2017's The Return, will be available to watch on Mubi as of Friday, June 13th. So today. So naturally, we decided to mark the occasion by sitting down on Zoom with two of the show's legends. First, co-creator Mark Frost talks to Mike Munster. Then Kyle MacLachlan, Agent Dale Cooper himself, has an in-depth chat with Chris Hewitt about Twin Peaks and his incredible friendship and working relationship with David Lynch. Pour yourself a cup of coffee, carve yourself a slice of cherry pie, and enjoy. So yeah, check this out. It's about an hour long. It's really, really good. There is a quote, though, that I would like to share with you. This comes to us from Fate Colossal over there on social media. He pulled this really awesome quote that Mark Frost said about creating the finale of season 3, not necessarily the finale of Twin Peaks, but the finale of season 3. And the quote says this: initially, the two of us were of two minds about how to end the season. I felt that going back and rescuing Laura and then having the mystery of her death disappear from people's memory might be an extraordinary way to bring us back to ground zero. But David kept pulling at this like a loose thread in a sweater. He finally said he has to pay a price for what he's trying to do. I used my mythological compendium in my head and said, of course he does. He's tempting the gods. He's trying to rewrite history. It's the equivalent of Orpheus descending into the underworld to bring back Eurydice. I'm probably mispronouncing that. So David said, I think I might have a way to get us to that second ending. In a way, it encapsulated both of our worldviews. I thought that was a really great quote there. So thank you for pulling that. And that comes from the Empire article. All right. Now, the reason why I'm doing this is because another Mark Frost interview just dropped via The Standard. I have not read it. I read bits and pieces of it, but I haven't read through the whole thing. So I wanted to kind of do that with you because it seems like Mark Frost is just going on tour, doing all kinds of great interviews. He is always welcome to come onto this channel and do an interview. I have asked him to be a guest on here a few times. Maybe one day he will take me up on that offer. All right. But until then, let's take a look at his interview here on The Standard. Says, it was poignant. Mark Frost on Twin Peaks and saying goodbye to David Lynch. 5 months on from David Lynch's death, his Twin Peaks co-creator Mark Frost takes us behind the scenes on the show ahead of a special screening at the BFI by Martin Robinson. So, Mark Frost, you are sitting there talking to me like a normal person, and yet you know exactly where and when Agent Cooper is at the end of season 3. Yes, of course. Will you tell me? No, I'm sorry. Well, it was worth a shot. I can't blame you for trying. I will say this though, if you're really paying attention to Twin Peaks and you watch it over and over again, you think about it, you can figure it out. All right. Anyway, for those who don't know, Twin Peaks, the greatest TV show ever made. That is a bold statement, but one that I will back you up on. Created and written by David Lynch and Frost, ended on the greatest cliffhanger conceivable. Well, one could argue that season one ended with one of the greatest cliffhangers, and season two ended with one of the greatest cliffhangers. They just know how to end each incarnation of Twin Peaks. No spoilers, but the final episode of Twin Peaks: The Return, to give season three its full title, ended on a note which was baffling, tragic, and hauntingly opened up a whole new world of intrigue. There's a pun, no pun intended there, huh? Special Agent Dale Cooper managed to find Laura Palmer, now named Carrie Page, don't ask, but ended up lost and confused in a different reality, time, occult, netherworld, his own mind. Theories about the ending take up about 60% of the internet, all of Reddit, and thousands of podcast hours. Even for Twin Peaks, with its demonic possession and doppelgangers and dreamscapes, it was, if you'll forgive me, a mind beep. But it's good to know that there is an answer to all the questions. It's not just surrealism for the sake of it. And it's just about putting together the clues. Absolutely. You can get as much out of it as you put into it. Let's put it that way, says Frost. It was always my feeling that we should reward scrutiny. That's always what I've admired in other people when they are done the deep work required to make sure that the subterranean levels of the building are solid so the foundation will stand up. You can't build a skyscraper on quicksand. You've got to dig down deep. This is the most beautiful thing, that there's so much to uncover. When David Lynch passed away in January this year, it was a huge loss for the world, for the arts, for spiritual leadership. He was a vocal advocate for transcendental meditation and just for the world's weirdness. It was like losing David Bowie again. Indeed, Bowie appeared in the incredible prequel film Twin Peaks: Fire Walk with Me. Selfishly, for fans like me, it also meant the end for Twin Peaks. Except it didn't. Twin Peaks won't end. It can't. An ending like that is meant to be debated, analyzed, and rewatched over and over again. Twin Peaks will never die, regardless. Okay. It lives inside your heart and your mind, but still, it's inside of you. And then there's another chance to be lost in a world at the BFI this weekend with a screening of the pilot episode of Twin Peaks on a 35mm print as part of their brilliant film on film season. All three series of the show are coming to movie 2. Shot on location in Snoqualmie and Washington State and North Bend. A few other places too in Washington, but yes, the pilot is a beautiful and devastating piece of work, which Lynch himself called the real Twin Peaks. And it is going to be a particularly special night at the BFI with Kyle MacLachlan and Cooper in attendance. Wow, very cool. And of course, with it coming in the wake of Lynch's death. I knew him pretty well for 40 years, says Frost. We knew he was suffering from emphysema and that he had a rough couple of years. I stayed in touch with him and sent him my best. He was resolute and strong in his mind, will as he always was, and determined to keep plugging away, stay creative, work on his ideas right up to the end. And I don't believe he was truly afraid of what came afterwards. I think all of his years of spiritual studies and his affiliation with TM is pretty well known. I think that gave him a kind of comfort about all of this that perhaps many people don't have. The possibility that he might be in a better place did occur to all of us, certainly free of the limitations of what this terrible disease had inflicted upon him. The two men originally met in 1986, which Lynch had successfully bounced back from the failure of his Dune film with the classic Blue Velvet. Frost was already a name in TV due to his work on Hill Street Blues, which went some ways to establishing TV as a serious medium, but Twin Peaks would take that to the next level. The pair were introduced to work on a film about Marilyn Monroe called Goddess, but it didn't work out. However, the pair got on and started to work on a TV series. The pilot opens with a body found on a shore, wrapped in plastic, that of Laura Palmer, homecoming queen with a lot of secrets. While Lynch loved the Marilyn story and that clearly lingered, the story actually came from Frost and came from a true live incident. The daughter of a family they knew growing up was abducted and killed, and when she was discovered, her younger brother had to stay with the Frosts for a few days, but we were told we couldn't tell him. This kid came and didn't know, that stay with me and the grief that came after. I didn't know this. I thought it was, recently about the whole Hazel Drew aspect, and obviously the Marilyn aspect, but I didn't know about this. This is new for me. So if it's new for me, it's probably new for a lot of you. What is entirely front and center in the pilot episode is that the Twin Peaks story is one of trauma. Laura Palmer was an abused girl, and her death then devastated a community. Spoilers for everybody who haven't watched a movie. And you could argue that everything that followed in Twin Peaks was about trauma in some way and how to escape it, including the collective trauma of a nation. But for all the heavyweight material, the show is also hilarious and eccentric. And Frost's principal memories of writing it are of him and Lynch hanging out together, drinking some damn fine coffee, and sharing ideas. Those were very heady days, but all of it was born out of our friendship and the joy that we experienced working with each other. Neither of us had ever really collaborated to that extent before, or really since, with another individual. I've been on staffs of television shows, which is sort of a team sport. With David, it was quite different. Every word, every sentence, every thought was something that we hammered out together, and it was something we quickly fell into when we began working. It was a very easy rhythm. We were like ideally matched tennis players, and we continually surprised each other. That was part of the joy of that collaboration because something extra seemed to come into the mix whenever we sat down. I like this picture in HD. You can the lips here with the makeup there. All right. For the pilot, he remembers we talk and talk and talk and have turkey sandwiches and go out to lunch and drink coffee and work things through verbally before we ever committed anything to paper. The pilot was written in 3 weeks. Once we had done all that prep work, we sat down and it just poured out of us. That's usually the way it works. If you do a lot of prep, you can just sit down and just it so well inside and out, right? It just explodes out of you. We scarcely went back to change a word. There was just something about that moment and the subject matter and that particular time in our lives where we felt a kind of grace about the work. Now, there is an assumption because of their backgrounds and reputation that Frost did all the basic TV stuff, the plot and characters, and then Lynch, cinema's great surrealist, put all the weird stuff over the top. Frost says that while he certainly brought a lot of TV production experience to the fore, while Lynch was a film guy, he says it was a true collaboration and suggests he was more like McCartney to his Lennon. I have been saying this for decades that David Lynch and Mark Frost were like John Lennon and Paul McCartney. And, because some people say that Lennon wrote great words and Paul wrote great music, but Paul could also write great lyrics and John could also write great music. So when you are in that vibe, I'm sure both of them very much complement each other. And it's very obvious from their work that they did just that. The ultimate illustration of Frost's part in the weirder aspects of Twin Peaks are the 2 books he wrote, The Secret History of Twin Peaks and Twin Peaks: The Final Dossier, which expanded the world of the show and gave further clues to some of the mysteries. We're talking layers and layers of story here, amounting to an alternative history of the USA, featuring the occult, the Manhattan Project, and a secret section of the FBI, the Blue Rose, as well as mythology about other worlds from where beings start to puncture into the reality of Twin Peaks more and more. Indeed, season 3 of the show is probably best understood as an allegory for an America which has lost its way and allowed the darkness to take over. He says he wanted to expand things quite early on and had the idea for the secret history during the 2nd season. Wouldn't it have been amazing if the secret history had been dropped, like, I don't know, it was like 10 years after season 2, and then we would have been like sitting with that for 10 years before the announcement of season 3, or at least the missing pieces. That would have been great too. I was always fascinated with building out the world. It's easy to say I was a word guy, he was a picture guy, but I did come from a literary and dramatic tradition, and I always felt that we were filming a novel. I had experienced that somewhat with Hill Street, which was groundbreaking in terms of how you expanded across episodes. Here, we decided to do that the entire way and see where how the world develops as we follow the story. I think that was something our audience really enjoyed. They really like to live in this world. Absolutely. That's since become a more common phenomena associated with television shows. But I think we might have been the first to do it to that extent. And that was something we were really proud of. All that said, there were moments where Lynch's legendary moments of inspiration on set sent things shooting off in different directions, such as when the director was leaning against a hot car when the image of the red room popped into his head. the strange waiting room with the talking backwards little man, which really knocked people's socks off. Now, remember, the floor was also featured in Eraserhead, so it wasn't completely pulled out of thin air. But yes, I understand. I can think of a number of instances like that where David would just have a visual that came to his mind, but it was always in some strange way pertinent, if only obliquely. I felt that then fell to me to figure out a way to weave it into the tapestry. I was in charge of the mythology department, making sure that there was some kind of continuity in how we presented the framework. Part of the fun and creativity is just going with it and trusting your intuition. And really, Frost recalls the amazement of seeing where his friend could take things on set. David was such an extraordinary, confident director that once you got everything on the page with him, I learned to simply trust he was going to deliver the goods. And in almost every instance I could think of, he would beat what was on the page because he was so alive and attuned to the moment with his actors, with all the elements of production like the maestro that he was. He delivered with our pilot in a way that I think he has never been matched. The pilot of Twin Peaks is extraordinary, one of the greatest pilots in the history of the medium, no question. It's hard now to conceive of just how transformative Twin Peaks was. TV just wasn't like that back then. Certainly not on prime time in the States. It was an odd, dark show, but such was the amazing quality of the show with a unique, fresh tone and and irresistible myself that it brought in huge viewing numbers. Super Bowl numbers on this strange little mid-season show that ABC didn't know what to do with. It produced a huge national "Who Killed Laura Palmer" talking point. ABC soon put pressure on the pair to reveal the killer, which Lynch thought killed the Golden Goose. And after season 2 ended, the show was canceled. 1992's Fire Walk with Me was a critical and commercial flop, but is now rightly seen as a masterpiece, a devastating look at abuse. But Mark Frost had nothing to do with that. Then Twin Peaks: The Return arrived in 2017 for what now seems a final heavyweight flourish for Lynch, a heavyweight and dense piece of work that was much darker in tone to the original series because, as Frost pointedly, the world had changed. Yet for all that, he says, reuniting everybody on The Return was a collective joy, the equivalent of the most incredible high school or college reunion that you could possibly imagine. We've ended up going through life with all these people, and it was intensely personal, and many great friendships were born from it. That was the most unanticipated benefit from this. His father, Warren Frost, made his last screen appearance in The Return. He plays Doc Hayward, and his son features in it too. It certainly seems like it will be hard for Frost to leave it behind. He has an upcoming book about Franklin D. Roosevelt he's working on. His great uncle was FDR's secretary. Wow, I didn't know that. And this will be a fictionalized account of his life in the White House. But the big question is, will he return to Twin Peaks, at least in book form? I'm certainly pondering it, he says, but I want to do it in a way that's respectful to David's absence. I don't want to just leap about it and do whatever I feel like. We created certain boundaries for what fits and what doesn't, and I would remain obviously very mindful of all of those, the internal guide rails that we had for ourselves, but we'll see. I have lots of other things I want to do, and I have been doing. Frost tells us about the last few times he saw Lynch. There were 3 towards the end, he says. One was when I called to congratulate him on his performance in The Fablemans. I thought he was marvelous as John Ford. I did too. I know Spielberg a little bit. Ooh, that's cool. And it was fun to think of the two of them working together. Could you think of a more unlikely pairing than the two of them? Well, little known fact, Steven Spielberg was supposed to direct the second season premiere of Twin Peaks until Lynch decided to do it himself. And then when Angelo Badalamenti passed away, we got together and talked a little bit about losing him. At this point, he'd had the diagnosis for emphysema. Then the last time we spoke, he'd finally announced he couldn't work anymore, at least not in the way he had been because of his health. I went over and had a cup of coffee with him. He was full of life and chipper, and that was a fitting way to part ways. I drove away thinking that's probably the last time I'll see him in person. It was very poignant. He pauses, and I mentioned that often he is painted as some kind of darkness when most of his stories from those who knew him are about what a charismatic drummer he was. Frost shakes his head. He was an absolutely delightful human being. He left a big gap. He was a force. He was a singular human being, a singular kind of talent, and he was a joy to know. I remember saying, the man from another place has gone home on the day that he died. And that may well be the case. I hope it is. So that's the end of the article. Twin Peaks: The Pilot is at the BFI on Sunday. So check it out if you are in that area. So anyway, yeah, that's quite an article, and I just want to thank Mark Frost for doing all these incredible interviews and shedding some light on so many things that it's nice to kind of have the little gaps filled, and because David Lynch felt so personal to so many of us that it's wonderful to kind of, I don't know, it just makes us feel like we know him even more. And I saw somebody write to me earlier today that said, the more I learn about David Lynch, the more I love him. And I just wholeheartedly agree. So, all right, guys, on that note, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Take care and have a wonderful day. All right, I'll see you soon.